Radiometric dating was available, many people thought the Earth was just thousands of years old. It's true. But then in the late 1700s, James Hutton. Did you realize, and this is a radical thought for most people today, that up until the early 1800s, essentially, most scientists believed the Bible and thought the Earth was only thousands of years old? It's true. So what did they discover at that particular time to change their minds, reject the Bible, instead believe in millions of years? What did they find? Well, I'll give you some hints. They did not find any new rocks or any new fossils. They had the same rocks and the same fossils. It was not radiometric dating that changed their minds. That comes in the early 1900s and is wildly inconsistent. So what did they find to change their minds? The answer is nothing. At least nothing tangible. But what they did find was a new world view, a new way to interpret the same old evidence. Let me show you what happened. We continue in the textbook. But in the 1700s, James Hutton estimated the Earth was much older. He used the principle of uniformitarianism. Big word, bold print, that'll be on the test. And this principle states that the Earth processes occurring today are similar to those that occurred in the past. In other words, the way things happen now, long, slow, gradual, natural processes only, is the way it's always happened in the unseen past. And he observed that the processes that changed the rocks and land around him were very slow. So he inferred. Another good word there might be assumed. They've been just as slow throughout Earth's history. He then hypothesized. Another good word for that would be guessed. It took much longer than a few thousand years to form the layers of rock and to erode the mountains around him. And so, guys, please notice Hutton got his conclusion of millions of years. Watch this, not based on any new evidence. He had the same rocks and the same fossils, but he had a different interpretation based on a different worldview that started with the assumption that God's word, a supernatural creation, global flood, that history is wrong, and that man's ideas about the past are a better starting point. Based on the principle of uniformitarianism, that the present is the key to the past. The way things happen now, long, slow, gradual, natural processes only, is the way it's always happened in the unseen past. And guys, that fundamental assumption is based in the worldview, the religion of naturalism, humanism, atheism, which basically says matter is all that exists, and you can and must explain all things through only natural processes. And these are religious assumptions. He was not being neutral. Neutrality is impossible. Either God's word is true or it's not. Either stand on God's word or you trust in man's ideas. There is no such thing as neutrality. And notice, religion wasn't kicked out of science at this point. It was just changed to a different religion. Naturalism, humanism became the new dominant religion. And his work had a huge influence on a guy named Charles Lyell, who became the father of modern-day geology. And Lyell applied uniformitarianism to the rock layers and fossils, and he basically argued we don't need Noah's flood to explain all the rock layers and all the fossils. He said we can explain all those rock layers and all those fossils and all the canyons with only natural processes, if we just give those natural processes enough time. Same basic ideology based on a naturalistic worldview. And what was his motivation? Similar to Hutton's, in this shift away from God's word to man's word being the foundation for our understanding of history? Well, Lyell said it well in a letter to a friend. His goal was to free science from Moses, get God out of science. Because ultimately, we must really realize this. Ultimately, this is not a head issue. It's a heart issue that becomes a worldview issue as a result. The heart issue, a battle over the will. Trust God's word, or you become as God, and you trust man's word instead. And so we see this shift starting really in a powerful way in the modern era, in the late 1700s, early 1800s, away from God's word. Hutton causes many to doubt the need for a creator and a creation roughly 6,000 years ago, based on naturalistic ideology. Lyell applies it to geology and causes people to doubt the need for a global flood as described in Genesis 6 through 9. And then along came another guy. And this guy loved Charles Lyell's work, and he loved the idea of uniformitarianism. And this guy had dropped out of medical school. He was actually in school to become a clergyman, But before kind of finalizing that, this guy took a trip on the Beagle as a naturalist and saw the Galapagos Islands and many other things. And he took Lyell's book with him and he applied uniformitarianism to biology. And who was that man? You probably guessed it, Charles Darwin. And Darwin argued, we don't need a creator to explain the diversity of life, just give natural processes enough time. And we see kind of this clear, progressive rejection of God's word on all things historical, especially about origins. And now, it's the point today where pretty much in every scientific field, the secular mindset dominates, and this secular worldview has permeated and dominates every secular scientific field, and they look at all things through that naturalistic lens. I can show you 1,000 quotes like this one here, a couple quick ones. Dr. Scott Todd put it like this from Kansas State University. He said, even if all the data, all of it, pointed to an intelligent designer, even if it all pointed to God, such a guess is excluded from science. Why? It's not naturalistic. Or this famous Harvard geneticist put it like this. He said, it's not that science compels, kind of paraphrase it by the way, it's not that science compels us to believe in materialism, naturalism, atheism. Rather, it's our prior commitment to materialistic causes that lead to materialistic explanations. And guys, please notice this. Notice the heartbeat he's coming from. And this materialism, bottom sentence, is absolute. Why? We cannot allow a divine foot in the door. Not a head issue, say heart issue. And because this mindset, guys, this mindset, write our textbooks. We see our textbooks say stuff like this all the time. Science is restricted to a search for natural causes, for natural phenomenon. Supernatural explanations are outside the bounds of science. Why? Because naturalism has become the new dominant religion of our world today, especially the Western world, but actually the entire world in different ways. And you know, Hitler said this. Hitler said, if you tell a lie loud enough and long enough, the people will start to believe it. And we see it happening right before our very eyes. So kind of putting all this together, we really see this foundational shift, starting in the 1800s, away from God's word to man's word as the ultimate authority. And now that secular ideology dominates the scientific community today. They have, in a sense, have been brainwashed with that worldview about the past. And so, guys, we should not be surprised that secular scientists get such radically different conclusions about the unseen past and the age of the earth, etc. They're starting with radically different starting assumptions about the unseen past. They're trusting man's ideas. We should be trusting God's word. And guys, today, this naturalistic worldview dominates the scientific community and is applied to every observation that they look at today, including things like radioisotopes. So to give you a quick example of how these assumptions are applied today with isotope dating, I will show you this particular quick little video from the DVD Check This Out. It gives you a 3-minute summary of radiometric dating. And as you watch this, hold on tight, it's a lot of stuff, but really catch the big picture message. Wrong assumptions, wrong conclusions. Your worldview really matters. Here you go.
This land is your land, this land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from the red.
When I first started Ancestry,
Your worldview really matters. Here you go.
Nearly every textbook in science, the Earth is billions of years old, and the primary dating method used for determining this is what is called radioisotope dating, or radiometric dating. Now, this is a reliable method for measuring absolute ages of rocks and the age of the Earth, right? First off, many scientists now regard the age of the Earth to be between 4.55 and 4.6 billion years old. Okay, so if this method is reliable and accurate, why the 50 million year discrepancy? That seems like a lot, but let's get into